Representative Igo moves that House File 249 be placed on the general register. Representative Igo, I believe you have an author's amendment. If you'd like to get the bill in the shape that you would like it and explain your amendment and to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I do have a quick author's amendment to get the bill in the shape I'd like for presentation today. The author's amendment just strikes line 1.10 out and replaces it. We just got rid of that 50% line. It cleans the bill up, makes it easier to understand. So that is my motion. If we could adopt that amendment, please.
All right. Any discussion to Representative Igo's author's amendment? All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion prevails. Rep. Igo, to your bill as amended.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. House File 249 is actually a pretty simple bill. It's getting at the carbon-free definition. So as we were talking through 2040 last year, we wanted to make sure that we are practicing an all-of-the-above energy approach to make sure that Minnesotans have access to safe, reliable, and affordable energy. So one of the things that Minnesota has that's part of our legacy industry is a vibrant and active timber industry. And in that timber industry, we produce lots of byproducts, whether that be slash, whether that be wood chips, whether that be sawmill dust. And right now, the only places that those things sit is in the yards, or they're paying tipping fees in our landfills. And not even just for those. Emerald ash borer, I know we've talked a lot about environment and even spilled into this committee a little bit. It's something that is a problem, not only here in the Twin Cities Metro, but in greater Minnesota. We have no valuable markets for this residual wood waste to go besides going into landfills, where it is being put into a landfill to rot and emit carbon, or it's being laid down in our forests, which produce fire hazard and even more hazards for insects and blight. So what this bill is going to do today is it would make carbon-free technologies apply to limbs, branches, and other byproducts of timber harvesting operations conducted to obtain wood for non-energy purposes. And that's a really important line in there, members, because I wanted to make sure it was very clear that we aren't going to be going out into our forests in Minnesota and clear-cutting them to produce energy. And nor would that ever happen. I know I've got some testifiers today who would talk about how valuable our timber industry is, and we're not going to see good cordwood being put into facilities for use to produce energy. And the other line that I put in there is discarded wood products, so that instead of bringing discarded wood products to landfills, they could go to facilities where we could create renewable carbon-free power and utilizing the lifespan of wood products. It's our greatest natural resource. You know, there's an interesting study I read once, you know, when we're just talking about how rare diamonds and gold are. But in reality, one of the rarest resources we have is wood products, because we don't know of anywhere else in the galaxy or in the world that they've been created yet besides right here. So let's utilize Minnesota in what we have in front of us, but with a vibrant timber industry, what's something we've been doing for a long time here in the state. We do it better than anywhere else. We manage our forests. Let's help create this market and give Minnesotans more affordable, reliable, and safe energy solutions to bring those costs down. So with me, I do have some testifiers today that are going to help tell that story, and I think we can move on to that then, unless there's any questions to start.
Any questions for Representative Igo? All right. Can we have Ray Higgins from Minnesota Timber Producers Association? If you'd like to introduce yourself to the committee, and you can go on with your testimony. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I'm Ray Higgins of the Minnesota Timber Producers Association. We're a trade organization representing loggers, truckers, sawmills, and allied businesses in our state's forest products industry. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House File 249. Designated, this renewable woody biomass as carbon-free will help our state achieve its climate goals. It'll allow and encourage utilities to make significant investments in converting coal-fired power plants to instead use forest residues like tops and limbs, as well as dead and dying non-merchantable timber. Keep in mind that carbon from forest biomass generated from management is already being emitted right now, either through decay or as fuel for wildfires. The tops and limbs we're talking about are currently on the forest floor, already decaying, emitting all of their carbon either this year or next. The good news is our forests are dynamic and can do more than one thing at a time. While some of this material is decaying and emitting carbon, Minnesota's healthy forests are simultaneously absorbing carbon. And because annual growth exceeds mortality by more than 3 times, that's a lot of carbon we're absorbing in our forests. It's important to focus on the biogenic life cycle and on studies conducted here in Minnesota and not done elsewhere, where the composition of the forest is different. For instance, studying this topic in Washington or Oregon, where different tree species grow, like redwoods or sequoias, something like that. They grow for centuries, have longer life cycles. That's not pertinent to what happens here in Minnesota. The lifespans of the various tree species in our state are significantly different. Researchers here in Minnesota say that Minnesota forests are significant carbon sinks, and it's not even close. Other states, like Colorado, have significant forest carbon emitters, and that's because they've got a lot more dead material on the forest floor than what we have. We have nice and healthy forests. Just last month, the Minnesota Forest Resources Council, a 17-member body created to advise the governor and legislature on forest policy, released a first-of-its-kind study examining carbon storage and emissions in our state's forestry sector. The study's findings are consistent with the efforts to utilize this material in energy generation. In short, using forest residue as outlined in House File 249 will only further the ongoing efforts in our state to keep our forests healthy. I thank Representative Igo for bringing this bill forward. He's a true friend of healthy forests, and I urge your support. And before I want to say one last thing. The next two testifiers won't say this about themselves, but Rod Enberg and Tom McCabe are former Minnesota Loggers of the Year. They've been doing this for a long time. To be Logger of the Year, you're recognized by the State Sustainable Forestry Initiative Committee as examples of the best forest management, sustainable forest management our state has to offer. So these two gentlemen wouldn't say that about themselves, so I'll say it for them. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Just a quick question, Mr. Higgins. Would you consider part of a carbon sequestration, so to speak, when it comes to the utilization of a tree, like a 2x4 or a beam, is that a form of storage as well?
Absolutely. Mr. Chair and members, absolutely. I was admiring this right here as I was sitting over here. Wood products are 50% carbon by weight. So all the woodwork we see in this room or the 2x4 that you mentioned, storing carbon right now. So when you make a forest product like a 2x4 or any of the beautiful woodwork we have in this room, that's storing carbon.
Thank you. Any questions for the testifier? All right, if you'd stick around just in case someone thinks something up, certainly appreciate it. Thank you. All right, Tom McCabe with the McCabe Forest Products. It sounds like you might be a Forester of the Year as well, so.
Logger of the Year.
Logger of the Year, sorry. If you want to introduce yourself to the committee, and welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chair and members, I'm Tom McCabe. I own a logging and trucking business in Duluth, Minnesota. Been in business for about 50 years. A big part of my business has been producing and selling woody biomass. Thank you for the opportunity to testify in support of House File 249. The biomass my company produces is mainly tops and limbs that are the result of a timber harvest. We deliver the roundwood to make paper, lumber, or other wood products. We feed the tops and limbs into a chipper to make biomass and ship it to places that use it for energy, like Minnesota Power in Duluth or Hibbing Public Utilities. Having markets for this biomass is critical to the success of my business and many others in our state. Profit margins in our industry are incredibly tight. Being able to market and sell biomass makes my business more profitable and allows us to further manage forests and make the wood products we all use every day. Removing some biomass helps reduce the fire danger and improves forest health in our state. To be sure, leaving some biomass behind on a harvest site is helpful for regeneration, soils, and other forest values. When we handle this material, all businesses in Minnesota follow biomass harvesting guidelines that were created by the Minnesota Forest Resource Council. These guidelines are best management practices and ensure that we do our work sustainably. Clarifying woody biomass is carbon-free and adding sources such as tops, limbs, and branches to this definition, as provided in House File 249, will encourage utilities to use this material in energy generation. It will help our state reduce carbon in the atmosphere and also help achieve our state's climate goals. House File 249 helps small businesses like mine all throughout Minnesota and gives a boost to our rural economies. I urge your support of House File 249. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCabe. Are there any questions? All right, thank you. Next, we have Rod Edinburgh from Edinburgh Logging. If you want to introduce yourself to the committee, and welcome to the committees.
Mr. Chair and members, Rodenberg from Motley, Minnesota. I don't have a lot of information that I'm gonna wing, so I'm gonna wing it here a little bit. I'll look back when I started logging back in like 1971 and 72, I started into it. Our timber permits were really kind of strange at the time. The species that we were harvesting was mainly aspen and oak. The maple, the birch, the ash, all of the alternate species that was on our sale, we were required to cut it and let it lay on the ground. We could not leave it there. If we did, why then we got fined to do that. So essentially what we were doing, we were wasting many, many tons of wood, not only with no market for it. So we fast forward a little, and then our requirements changed, of course, and then biomass was always difficult to get rid of, so we never really embraced it until the power plant in Benson started up, where they were actually blending turkey litter with our wood chips. That was really a godsend for us in the timber harvesting business, because we had our resource readily available, which was our tops, limbs, our alternate species that we would leave in the woods. All of a sudden, we had a market for. And it was a good market. It fluctuated up and down. But there again, we were not carbon neutral or classified as that at the time. And there was an awful lot of, pointing fingers on why the Benson power plant went down. But if we would have had a carbon neutral classification at the time, well, maybe things could have changed and looked a little better, and our business would have continued to go on. And not only myself on that closing, we were generating a very large amount of money for our little town, which was about $5 million a year. Well, your ancillary spinoff from that was pretty nice for our local economy. Not only my business was impacted by that, but Representative Wiener, he was delivering product and biomass to Benson at the same time. So, he is well aware of what the ramifications of that was when we lost that market. Now, a story of hope that kind of got dashed as I was driving down here. An engineer 2 weeks ago called me about the possibility of biomass utilization at a recycling paper product plant in the Becker area. I called him today to see how that was going. Well, they torpedoed it basically to use natural gas and propane, which is an expensive way to make their product. But if it would have been a carbon neutral classification for our biomass products and chips, would that have made a difference on the decision whether they would have went on this plant? Possibly another market that we need desperately for our biomass and woody debris. So now I'll step on to can I talk a little bit, to a real success story. I'm a partner at American Peat Technology in Aiken, Minnesota. All right, when we started that business, we were burning propane. And we process peat, and the product that we make is an inoculant that goes international, and it grew and it grew and it grew, and our business was really struggling for energy costs, because we were committed to propane because we're remotely located. So we decided to go with burning chips. And by burning chips, we spent about $1.25 million the first year to put in our chip burning system. It paid for itself in the first 3 years, and our business has grown now so that we're employing 42 people there full-time, good jobs, great success story for the biomass industry. Now, if we were carbon neutral, would that help us as far as being able to market our product more internationally, that we can claim it as a carbon neutral product that we're producing with biomass? A label that in some businesses is very important. So as I stop talking, I guess the three stories of woe, hope, and success, if we can get more industries in this state that would embrace the use of biomass and use it and capitalize on the carbon neutral classification for whatever it be, for marketing or tax incentives, it would be really a great thing, and I appreciate Senator Igo for bringing this to the,
Mr. Inberg, don't do that to him.
but,
I'm just teasing. He's a rep. I'm just teasing.
okay, all right. I'm done.
No, you're doing good. We're just having fun, so.
What did you say?
All right, any questions? We don't want any demotions happening at the front desk, so.
All right.
Are there any questions? All right, thank you. All right, Rick Horton with the Minnesota Forest Industries. Come to the table and identify yourself, and welcome to the committee.
Mr. Chair and committee members, how do you follow that, right? Nothing like getting the citizens up here to speak. My name is Rick Horton. I'm the Executive Vice President of Minnesota Forest Industries. We're a trade association representing the primary wood-consuming mills in the state, so the big paper mills, big sawmills, and that sort of thing. Woody biomass energy production can provide reliable, dispatchable baseload power from a source that is renewable and sustainable. That's a key point. You know, the big industries need reliable energy. We need safe energy. You can't just shut down a paper mill. You can't just shut down an iron mine. It destroys equipment, and it's really unsafe for the workers. So it is important to have this baseload power as we work on energy transition, right? Energy production from woody biomass is carbon neutral. Atmospheric carbon is absorbed by trees. If you were to design a piece of equipment that could do this, you'd be a rich man. But a tree just sucks carbon right out of the atmosphere and turns it into wood. We turn that wood into products that all of us use every single day. If we were not even there, it would still be in that closed loop. The tree absorbs it, the tree eventually dies or burns up, and the carbon is released back. More trees absorb it. It's a closed loop. Far better than taking fossil carbon that's been in the ground for billions of years and releasing that into the atmosphere, right? So it's a case of, you know, if not this, what, to get that baseload, that reliable baseload power. And creating a use for this material is very beneficial for the forest itself. We've got over 700,000 acres of dead and dying balsam fir in northeastern Minnesota from the spruce budworm. We've got emerald ash borer. It's killed most of the ash trees in the metropolitan area and is creeping north. And if it ever gets into our black ash stands, we're going to see 1 billion cords of dead trees, 1 million acres of dead trees. We've also got 1 million acres of dead and dying tamarack from eastern larch beetle. These are all species we don't have a lot of markets for. And so having this tool to help us manage forest health would be amazing, right? You know, and we also go to great lengths to protect natural resources. There was a time, you know, at the, you know, way back when we were unsustainable. We know we harvested trees and then didn't think of the future. We have dramatically changed that in the last 150 years. We are all about sustainability. We have site-level guidelines in place to ensure that we're protecting the soil, we're protecting the water, cultural resources, recreational, scenic vistas. We have third-party certification entities that set standards and guidelines that we follow, and we are audited annually to make sure we're following those guidelines to ensure that we are ecologically, socially, and economically sustainable. Now, we are the 5th largest industry in the state. We provide good-paying jobs and support rural communities across northern Minnesota. And the development of biomass-based energy production will strengthen the industry and provide more employment for folks like Rod and Tom that you heard here. And I will say that industrial electricity rates are already very high in Minnesota. You know, we have competitiveness studies where we looked at industrial electricity rates in competing states, And we exceeded Wisconsin. It's one of the few things we shouldn't be too proud of here, but we exceeded Wisconsin in 2018, and our industrial energy rates are the highest among competing states. And so as we look at this carbon-free by 2040 bill and its implications and worry about what that's going to mean for cost, this is one way we can keep those costs in check and still have that reliability and that safety that we all require. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Horton. Are there any questions? Was that Representative Meckland?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure, I want to clarify with you, Mr. Horton. If a tree, all these, the tops, the branches, all that, if it's just left to decay, does that carbon then end up back in the atmosphere?
Mr. Horton?
Mr. Chair and Representative, it takes time for the trees to break down, but it's faster than people would realize. We have a very wet environment. And so yes, when there's decay, a lot of it goes back into the atmosphere as part of the decay process. Some of it goes into the soil as part of the decay process and goes into leaf litter for a while and then into these other pools. But eventually, the lion's share of it goes back into the atmosphere. Thank you.
Representative Meckland? Representative Kraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And so I want to thank all the testifiers that we were talking about forestry. It's a really important service that you all provide. I do want to dig into a couple things. On the decaying and going back into the atmosphere, I've looked it up. I think it takes tens of years, probably 40 to 70, depending on the environment. Sound reasonable to you?
For all of, Mr. Chair and committee member, yes. For all of it, I've seen estimates of that, and it all depends on the type of tree. You know, like an oak decays a lot slower, a maple decays a lot slower than, say, a pine tree or an aspen tree.
Correct. And
Representative Kraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And then the other side of this is when folks are talking about wood, they all talk about that you grow a new tree and that can absorb carbon. But if you're replacing a tree that's lost or that's fell down, that also is probably talking about taking tens of years at least, correct, to absorb the same amount of carbon, is that from your understanding?
Mr. Kraft? Sorry, Mr. Horton?
Mr. Chair and Representative. So a young tree absorbs carbon at 3 times the rate of an old tree. If you ever look at old growth, true old growth wood, which is hard to come by, you'll notice the rings are very close together because they really aren't absorbing a whole lot of carbon anymore. They're storing it, you know. But if we take that tree and we turn it into wood products, we can substitute for other things that are more carbon intensive. In construction, that would be concrete and steel, right? So that's a whole nother factor. But yes, the forest, the young forest takes a while to get back to that same amount of storage. But we look at carbon on 100-year cycles and across the landscape. We have far more trees dying of old age, insects, and disease in Minnesota than we cut down every year. We only cut 1% of the forest every year.
Representative Kraft?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So tens to hundreds of years. I'm just trying to establish a baseline. I said, I think the stuff that you all do in clearing out is a really important service. I'm just trying to make sure we agree on timelines, and I'll come back later with further discussion. Thanks.
Sounds good. All right, thank you. Any other questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Hanson. Sarah Meridian? You want to come to the table and introduce yourself? Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chair Swedinski and committee members. As you have heard over the last couple of weeks, you are familiar with me, but my name is Sarah Meridian, and I'm the Government Relations and Policy Director for CURE. We're a rurally based nonprofit dedicated to protecting and restoring resilient towns and landscapes by harnessing the power of the people who care about them. I appreciate the opportunity to testify in opposition to House File 249 today. As you all know, in 2023, the legislature passed the 100% carbon-free law. The law explicitly states that carbon-free means a technology that generates electricity without emitting carbon dioxide. That language is not ambiguous. It is crystal clear. If a technology emits carbon dioxide in the process of generating electricity, it is not carbon-free. Despite this, House File 249 seeks to defy logic and science by declaring that carbon-free includes a method that, by its very nature, emits carbon. In comments to the Public Utilities Commission about how the commission should interpret the unambiguous carbon-free, even the Minnesota forest industries, who we just heard from, acknowledged the reality that CO2 is emitted when burning woody material. the irrefutable fact is that the combustion of wood chips or any biomass wood feedstock emits carbon dioxide. Beyond this, there are additional concerns that come with burning biomass. First, despite arguments that biomass is carbon neutral, the reality is much more complex, and ample research has shown that the life cycle emissions of CO2 for forest biomass is often worse than the same amount for energy generated by fossil fuels, accounting for feedstock, the fossil fuel replaced, and the efficiency of combustion. Additionally, detailed analyses have shown that biomass plants can emit greater amounts of other pollutants, including nitrogen oxides, volatile organic compounds, particulate matter, and carbon monoxide, than coal plants generating the same amount of energy. That this bill includes the catch-all discarded wood products is especially concerning, as this could allow for the combustion of treated lumber such as creosote rail ties and other contaminated wood products, which produce additional toxic air pollutants. For these reasons, CURE encourages you to reject this bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? All right, those are the folks that have called ahead to testify on House File 249. Do we have any folks from the public that would like to testify? Anyone? Member discussion. Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Representative Igo, thanks for bringing this bill. I want to, some of the testifiers said that wood is renewable and sustainable, and I don't think I would disagree with that in the right time frame, and then also said carbon neutral. But what I want to talk about is on what time scale can you consider something to be carbon neutral? And I think based on the discussions that I had, the questions that I had with one of your testifiers, that we're talking really probably something on the order of 30, 50, 70 years. Would you agree with me?
Representative Igo.
Mr. Chair and Representative Kraft, so I think when we're looking at the time scale here, you're going to understand the way that we grow and harvest our forests in Minnesota. So yeah, when we're cutting down a stand of 60-year-old popple, and I know my timber producer friends over here, those are hard to come by. That's good wood. But on the, usually it's lesser in age than that. And in that whole lifespan, it's been sequestering carbon, storing carbon, taking it out of the atmosphere, cleaning it up. And then what we're talking about here is what's left behind when we take that wood to market. So just the limbs and the branches. So in that time span, because it has sequestered more than it's going to emit when it is burned, which hence is making it carbon neutral.
Representative Kraft.
Mr. Chair, it's Representative Igo, it's sequestering more. I don't know that I fully understand that. But here's the real concern I have with this. I think it very often may be a good thing for us to be having some productive use with waste wood, right? We have a lot of issues with emerald ash borer, the other things. So I think that's not a bad thing to do that. What I object to is it's fundamentally not carbon neutral when it's happening. And let me just give you a thought here. If it takes 20, 30, 40, 50 years to be carbon neutral, at that, let's say 40 years from now, that's 2065. If we continue on our current path of carbon emissions, we will probably, without change in the world, we will probably be at close to 3 degrees increase in temperature compared to pre-industrial times. We can't do that. We're barely at, not even at 1.5 right now. We're seeing incredible extreme weather and impacts and forest fires and all kinds of things. So that world is not a world that we want our kids and grandkids to live in. So I think we have to be really careful with counting. And one of the testifiers spoke about that designating this as carbon neutral would be a marketing benefit. I agree, I'm sure it would be, but it wouldn't be counting the carbon emissions that are happening when wood is burned in the right way. So I will say, I think it is a reasonable thing to do, but let's not confuse that this is a path for that we might want to use for some of this waste wood and things with something that is carbon neutral on a time frame that matters. So that's all I would say is, okay, I can see why, but let's not bastardize the approach of what carbon neutral is from a marketing perspective.
Representative Kraft, was that more of a comment than a question?
Mr. Chair, I think it was.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you, Representative Kraft. Representative Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Igo, for bringing this to our committee and for an opportunity to talk about this. I'm actually excited to dig into this issue. I always come back to what is the issue or the problem that we're trying to solve, and from what I've kind of been gathering, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like the issue is more about finding a market for our forest products. Can you help me confirm if that's the problem?
Representative Igo.
Mr. Chair and Representative Jones. So yes, it's creating a market, but it's also trying to help eliminate waste, right? In the Twin Cities metro here alone, 10 to 12 truckloads of emerald ash borer are being brought to our landfills and paying tipping fees, or they're just being put in landfills to rot and emit carbon. We have nowhere else for those to go. If you go across our state and see a lot of our other mills that have, whatever they're producing, have slash piles that just sit there and rot because there is no markets for them because we don't have legislation like this on the books. So there is no market to be created for them. So what this bill is trying to do today is to create a market for them while also getting at the science of the fact of what these things are. So we're not just going to continue to emit carbon for no reason because it's going to get emitted somewhere or another.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Representative Igo. It's helpful. I also agree. I don't want waste. I think a lot of us, or most of us, want to make sure that we're avoiding waste. And so, I guess one of the things that I'm struggling with is, so I've worked in energy for a while. Also, my husband and I, we ran a composting, commercial composting facility at one point, and at that time, our biggest struggle was actually carbonaceous, so carbon material. And so I'm wondering if there's maybe a disconnect in that kind of arena because we have a lot of food waste, but we actually don't have enough carbon material. So I think that's maybe an opportunity that we maybe don't need to create policy around. The other piece is, does this, are we precluded in any way from using our woody waste for heating at the moment?
Representative Igo.
I probably want to have one of my testifiers respond to that. I mean, where I'm from and where I live and where some members of this committee live, we have, many of my constituents heat their homes with wood right now and wood boilers. That is correct. Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother discussion, though, if you want to get into that, about some of the rules and regulations that have been coming up behind that, making that more expensive and harder to do. I don't know if that necessarily pertains to what we're getting at here in the bill today, though.
Okay.
Representative Jones.
Yeah, just maybe one last thing on that. Just the other space that I've been seeing a lot of woody biomass used is at the St. Paul District Energy Plant, I think also in Duluth. And so, and I've again, in my conversations, I've been hearing it's like, well, at one point or at some point, we're going to run out of the emerald ash borer, infected trees. And so we're going to need more of that, or more wood in order to fuel that plant. So just maybe trying to connect some dots because I think there is some opportunity. And so, I think similar to Representative Kraft, I'm not on board with calling this carbon free, but I think there are some markets, and I'm happy to continue a conversation about identifying what are the markets so we can make sure that this really important product is put to good use.
Representative Igo. Good. All right. Representative Acom.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the discussion today. I think we've had this discussion with Representative Igo a couple of times over the years, and so I appreciate the chance to talk about it again. And while I don't have a question, I have more just a comment, and that is really the heart of the issue for me is on line 1.8 of the bill, that generates electricity, the definition of carbon-free, generating electricity without emitting carbon. And biomass does not fit into that bucket. And so while I appreciate that energy can be generated in that way, I think it can't be called carbon-free if it is. And so I think we've talked about other ways, whether it's district heating that it can be utilized in. I think that there are some concerns I also have about additional emissions that come with transporting, processing, and the like of of biomass that add to the life cycle. So all in all, I would encourage my members to vote no on the bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any other discussion? All right. Representative Weiner?
Thank you for bringing this bill forward. And I think the testifiers did a good job of explaining the process at the beginning. If you go out to a forest, you don't get to utilize all of the material. Trees have crook, they have bend, they have knots, they have other things that you just can't use. The branches are just part of it. But my experience in moving forward is everything that we do or that we kind of deal with in our society is moved on a wood product at some point in time or another. Your shipping almost always goes on pallets. We have a housing shortage in our state, which that material can come from the sawmills that we're talking about. And when you take that round log and you cut off the edges, you make slabs. That slabs is waste. Those sawmills produce a lot of material that cannot be utilized for another product. If you take a semi-load of logs, you put it on a log deck, and I've got some experience with this, your usable material can be anywhere from 50 to less % of those logs that came in. So all of that extra material has to find a place to go with, or two. So if you want to fix the housing shortage in the state of Minnesota, you also have to look at the waste that's there in the production. The trusses that go into that house have to be trimmed, boards have to be made, they have to be planed down, so there's sawdust, there's trim pieces. I can tell you that truss manufacturers in our area can produce semi-loads a day of waste material. This bill gives the opportunity to take that material from the start to the finish and give it a place to go. When we talk about the emerald ash boards, that's a small portion of the resources that are out there. It was staggering when I first started learning about this, how much waste, unusable material. I won't call it waste because it is usable in one form or another. To turn it into energy is a very viable option. And when we look at everything that we can do and everything that it touches in our lives, like I said, your cabinets is something that's gonna be made out of those woods just grown here in Minnesota. Trusses, pallets that everything ships on, the brush from our landscaping companies across the metro, all of that is a usable product in another source. And whether it's carbon in the air from decaying material or the industries themselves, California has different biomass burners now. I think, Michigan has put up another one. Other states are saying that this is a usable product and it meets those standards. I think we're selling ourselves short, our opportunity short, our industry short in this state by not adding this. Thank you for bringing this forward.
Representative Kraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So briefly, Representative Weiner, I want to be really clear for myself. I'm not arguing that there shouldn't be a use for these things and that there's not some good uses and potentially could be even for generating electricity. I'm just arguing that we shouldn't lie to ourselves that this is carbon-free per the bill. We can work on finding ways to help this industry and deal with this waste, but let's not just classify something that it simply isn't.
All right, Representative Igo, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members, for a great discussion today, but I really want to thank my testifiers who came down, 2 of which are in a very busy time of the year right now, so to take time to come to St. Paul and testify on this behalf, I just thank you. And the committee members, those are 2 people that really know a lot about this, and I'm glad everyone paid attention and listened. So this bill today, there's been kind of the back and forth about what is carbon-free and what isn't, and we shouldn't, quote, lie to ourselves. I think that if we're going to pick that mentality, if we're going to talk about things, let's make sure we use science for all things. Because from the testifiers I had today, from the science you can read, when trees are growing their whole life, they're sequestering carbon until the day we cut them and use them for the wood products we use in our everyday lives. What's left over, the residuals, could be used to help us have more affordable, reliable, and safe power. That carbon that would be emitted in that process would be less than those trees sequestered their entire lifespan. In fact, most of this you could actually consider, if you bring out your old-fashioned abacus and follow where the carbon's going, you could actually say this is probably carbon negative. Because maybe what's left over of those residuals built the desk that's in front of me right now, it's gonna sit here for another 50 years. And we're doing that every year when we harvest 1% of our forests and replant them, and that's why we have more forests than we ever have had in the state of Minnesota, because we're doing such a good job at replenishing them. So I think the comment that was made is let's not lie to ourselves about what's carbon-free. You know, we had this discussion in committee 2 years ago when we talked about solar and wind. Solar and wind takes over 17 to 20 years to offset the carbon it used to create it. We had that discussion, right? And if we want to pick and choose what science we follow to fit the narrative that we want, that's a problem when we're talking about policy for the entire state. That's a problem when we're talking about the policy for future generations. Because science isn't about picking and choosing, it's about following the facts and the figures. And this bill today is doing that. It's partnering with one of Minnesota's legacy industries, the 5th largest in the state, to make sure that when we have residuals, whether they're in greater Minnesota communities or right here in downtown St. Paul, we are creating markets to provide that affordable, safe, and reliable power. So if the carbon's going to be emitted anyway, at least it's not happening in a landfill. At least it's not being charged back to people and it's not being used for something. So this bill in front of us today is going to put us in step in the right direction and follow red states and follow blue states. In fact, you could look at this bill as a compromise. You have a Republican in front of you coming to work on the 2040 bill, realizing what you're trying to do here and trying to find a way to market this and work on it together so that all Minnesota prospers. So we have one Minnesota. So I'd encourage the committee's support today and hope we can continue having these good conversations, because these are the ways we have to think and we have to come together on if we want Minnesota to succeed and prosper and be a place for generations to come. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Representative Igo renews his motion that House File 249 as amended be placed on the general register. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. No. The motion prevails. This motion passes and the bill be on its way to the general register.